third Buffalo takeaway today. An end zone throw. That's going to be a Buffalo touchdown to Gabriel Davis. But he's got some blocks. John Brown zooming inside the 5. First and goal, Buffalo. Plenty of time for Josh Allen. Wide open. End zone. Touchdown, Buffalo Bills.
This is the Buffalo Nerd with Colt Schroeder.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the 5th episode of the Buffalo Nerd. That's right, I've made it to 5 of these. It's pretty impressive for somebody who didn't think I was going to get the first one out. So, yeah, and as you can see, again, you're fortunate enough to see that I have a guest, so you don't just have to listen to me talk, you know, and I've actually got double guests, all just in one screen today, for those of you watching. So I'm joined today by Charlie Gross, and this is wife Mellissa. And we're going to be chatting today. You know, the show, The Buffalo Nerd, obviously we're all about, you know, talking about charity and, you know, getting some information out there for people to learn about things that are taking place around them. So we're going to be chatting up the National Fibromyalgia Association today, which I'm going to butcher this a bunch. So I might just say the NFA, if I can remember to say that instead of as we're going through this. But let's go ahead and let Charlie go ahead and introduce himself. I'm excited to have him. I'm big into nerd kind of number stuff. And Charlie's kind of a founder of something that I'm interested in learning about. And I hope you guys are too. So Charlie, go ahead and let us know who you are, man. Where do you come from?
Hello. Well, I am a lifetime Western New York native. I'm currently the host of the 2 shows on the Bills Brawl as part of the Brawl Network. And I also have started my own NFL draft analytics company called, believe it or not, Trust the Process Analytics. So yes, I am a Bills fan. Mm-hmm. And we've got the main metric is a metric that basically measures whether a draft pick is a hit or a miss and the value that a team received from that pick, kind of the same way that teams will grade players 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, however they do it. We've got a few other metrics coming out in the fall, completion percentages, some stuff like that. But the draft value score is our baby and the thing we're really passionate about.
Okay, and you're joined by your wife Mellissa with us tonight. Mellissa, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Mellissa, aka Kitten at the Disco. Some of the main podcasters know me. They have taught me the football over the years. I mean, that's really about it.
Well, and you're a co-founder of Trust the Analytics or Trust the Process Analytics, right?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I'm not a math person at all. I really suck at math. So basically, I just am the ideator type person. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just throw some stuff out, you know, give advice, things like that, do some research here and there. I don't do any math.
You're definitely the rock, right?
Oh,
you're okay. So absolutely. So you are more than the co-founder. You're realistically the drive behind what's taking place. And actually, you are the main drive for what we're going to be talking about today, as far as the charity or organization that we're going to spotlight, and that is the NFA. Or the National Fibromyalgia Association. I jacked it up. I wanted to try it one more time, though, just before I switched over to NFA. But so, Charlie, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody why you chose, the NFA?
Well, she first got sick. Feel free to correct me. She first got sick about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, all right after the birth of our twins. And we had a lot of trouble figuring out what it was. We thought it was a thyroid issue or something along those lines. All the tests came back negative. And I could see the first things is that she's in a lot of pain. You know, she was bedridden for weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time, and we couldn't figure it out. And just the impact that fibromyalgia has had on her life and just even the difficulty in getting a diagnosis was just incredible. Yeah. How difficult it was. And I thought about doing cancer because my dad passed from cancer. But let's be honest. I mean, cancer is terrible, but it doesn't need a spotlight either. You know, most people listening have never heard of fibromyalgia. And I thought that would just be something that we would be better prepared to shine a light on. Not that cancer is good. Of course, it's bad, but it gets a lot of attention, deservedly so. And I wanted to shine a light on something that's affecting me and my wife right now, and our kids, our whole family, to be honest.
Right, absolutely, and this is cool too because part of me wanting to do this is so far we've had some pretty large organizations that we've been chatting about that I think most people are familiar with, right? But so for me, I wanted this to kind of bring a little more of. I'm hoping too that as I go through this, that it'll put the spotlight on smaller foundations and smaller things that are taking place, even if it's just something that's happening right there in the backyard of Western New York, like how great Del Reed is with 26 shirts, right? Like that's still a foundation. That's still an organization and doing great things. So it was cool to see you choose something different. I don't have a ton of experience with this, but I do have a coworker that has been diagnosed with it. And, I've heard some stories and I have some understanding of what it's like. I don't know it personally myself, right? But I've been told what it's like. So that's cool. And then on top of that, we get Mellissa to come on today, because part of what I want to do too is I'm hoping in the future is those folks that are putting together these organizations and charities, they get their moment to come on here and chat too, right? So to speak up for what the NFA is doing, this works out perfect. We've got Mellissa. So Mellissa, how long do you think before you were finally diagnosed you actually were feeling all of this?
Well, it actually started when I had my son, when I was 18. I had a botched epidural and it broke the spinal fluid in my back. And then they had to do like a blood patch where they take blood from your arm and try to fill the spot where the fluid is missing. And that was just kind of like a starting point. And then I had my second child and I had to have an emergency cesarean. So they had to go back in, do another epidural. It's causing more damage. And then I had the twins, and I'm very petite. I'm 4'11". The twins, I mean, my belly was down to my knees. It's a lot of weight. I'm not kidding. I have pictures.
Right. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, it was a lot of weight and a lot of pressure on my spine, a lot of pressure on my body. And then I had to have another cesarean. And I think that was it. Like, that's the straw that broke the camel's back right there. And immediately after I had the twins, it was like a snowball. And I just started getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And it just didn't end. I mean, eventually I ended up bedridden, like permanently for years. So that's it.
Yeah. So you finally, I mean, that's crazy. You went from, just having this great journey of having kids and, you have twins and everything's going great. And then the next thing, you can't get out of bed. Right. So that's tough. So once you found out and they finally kind of told you what it was, you kind of really can't control it all that well, kind of from my understanding. Right. I mean, it's just like, you might have a great stretch where everything's awesome and everything's going great. And then you might have a terrible stretch. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, there's no cure for it. There's only probably 5 medications that you can take for it to kind of treat it. And then there's pain management. I'm actually allergic to one of the medications. It actually killed me. I went into like anaphylactic shock and it killed me. So I had to be brought back from that, like EpiPen, whole 9 yards. It took 10 doctors to diagnose me, first off. One of the doctors, I was crying in his office and I was like, look, I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I'm going to die. And I'm in like my late 20s, early 30s. And he looks at me and he says, well, we're all going to die sometime. And
that's nice.
That's the doctors I had to deal with. Like, people told me I was crazy. It was all in my head. It was new mom syndrome, to exercise, to eat right. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. And it was so frustrating. And then to finally get a diagnosis from a great doctor and to be put on all these trial medications and nothing's working. And then you're gaining 60 pounds and then you're literally dying. And it's a crazy journey. It's crazy.
So you found something now though that works? They've been able to get you something, or I don't mean like when I say works, I mean like get you to where you are comfortable and can make it through,
Right. When I finally found my miracle doctor, which I absolutely love, he sat down and he said, look, tell me what's wrong. And that was the first doctor to ever do that. And we formulated a plan. None of the fibro medication was working. We went to pain management, and it changed my life. I was able to get out of bed. I was able to start exercising again. I was able to go back to my job. It changed my whole life. And it's crazy too, because people with chronic pain are often judged and there's a stigma, and doctors and people like to call us like pill chasers and, junkies and all that stuff. But if it wasn't for the meds that I'm on, I would either be dead or I would be stuck in bed still and not living my life.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, I think it happens with a lot of things that we tend to do that as just human nature. It's I don't know why we do it. And I've been noticing it even more and more as everybody's been home, right? Is that we tend to try to venture towards the worst possible scenario of somebody instead of just being like, well, hey, that seems fair to me. I mean, I don't know everything that happens in this world. I don't know every disease that's out there. I don't know what everybody's having to go through. It's just the same. So I tend to trend towards I try to give everybody benefit of the doubt. I mean, it is what it is. I have a son that was born with cerebral palsy. I have an aunt who has cerebral palsy. I mean, it's just sometimes that's the way it is, right? And instead of trying to point somebody and being like, oh, okay, this is what they're after, instead of just being like, let's figure out a way to help them, right? Because obviously something's going on. They have 3 kids. They're 4. Is it 4? Did I count 4? 4 kids.
Yeah.
Right? 4 kids, right? So there's 4 kids involved, right? There's a big family involved in this, right? We got to do what we can. So you guys chose for multiple, obviously the main reason is it's very, very in front of you, right? So we chose the NFA to talk about. And can you speak a little bit about kind of what the NFA offers, or like kind of what like if somebody goes to donate, right? You can see running across the bottom of the screen. It'll be in the show notes, for folks that are going to catch this on, the podcast version on Spotify and Apple and everything. You'll have the link available to you there too, to be able to donate. What is that money going to go towards?
Well, they do fund research. Fibromyalgia is in this really sort of weird state where they've done a lot of research and there is targeted specific research, but it's still a big mystery. Basically what fibromyalgia is it's really inflammation of the nervous system. So when you sprain your ankle swells. Imagine that happening to all your nerves in your body all the time. And I think when she first got it, I said, well, what does it feel like? And I believe what you said was, I feel like I'm being set on fire from the inside while somebody's scraping off my skin with a razor blade.
And electrocuting me.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
So what they've kind of discovered is that it's sort of, there are a lot of brain chemicals involved. There's spinal fluid. There's amino acids in your spinal fluid. I know this is like super technical. So they know what it does, but they don't know necessarily how it starts, and they don't know how to cure it. Like, do you take a pill? Because there's just so many different things. Like, you can get it genetically, you can get it, as she said, from spinal damage. They're saying that you can get it growing up in an abusive household. Even that kind of abuse can eventually trigger fibromyalgia. So they haven't narrowed down one thing, and since they can't do that, they don't know how to cure it. So a lot of it's going to go to research. Some of the money goes to putting people in contact with other people, telling them how they can better their lives. Exercise works for some people, and for some people it doesn't. Her case is very severe. Exercise doesn't make it better, but we have a friend who it made him better. There's no really one set thing. And I think there's also a thing on there for the families too. And the thing with the family, I think, is that's probably the most difficult thing. And our kids are just so used to it now. But imagine, your kid comes in and says, "Hey, can I see mommy today?" And it's like, "No, honey, she's too sore. She's in a lot of pain." Or if they do see her a lot of time, they have to hang out, in bed and watch a movie or a show or anime, whatever it is. And they're used to that, but we'll go on vacation, and the one thing is you and I will, work a job, right? Go to the gym, whatever it may be, and we get home, we're a little sore, right? We got like the trigger point going in our shoulder, like, oh man. Well, hers swell up, She can't bend her arms or her legs. And if she works an 8-hour shift, she's bedridden for 2 days. So if we go on vacation or something, or she says, well, I'm going to go play with the kids outside, she has to realize that doing that is going to make her immobile for 2 days or a day.
Right.
So if we go walk the mall in Toronto for 2 hours, we've got to stop, and it's fine. I'm not complaining, believe me, but that's how we have to manage her energy. Because if she does too much, or she goes too hard at gardening or her work, whatever it is, she's going to pay the price for that over the course of the next couple of days, and that's what her life is. So they offer support for families. They offer support for the people who have it too.
And awareness.
Right. An awareness. It's like she said, it's a silent disease. There's no tumor to cut out. There's no radiation. There's no, you're not testing for your blood sugar. So people see her and well, what's the problem? Like, why aren't you at work today? Suck it up. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
And there's, she looks.
Yeah, if you look at her, she looks perfectly healthy, right? Like just normal.
So they
normal woman
would all those things on the association.
Yeah, I think even for everybody that watched the second episode when I had Jenna Cottrell on, she went through cancer and all that, and one of the main things that we talked about with that organization was the support system, right? It's a lot of times it's just educating the people around you the best that they can of what's going on for that person, right? Like you might have a hard time, like when this was first happening, I don't know, right? But I feel like there could have been a friction where it was like, is this really happening? Like I don't know what to do with this, right? She's telling me this, and this, and I don't know what to do with this, so that having a support staff around and being able to meet other people that have the same things going on, right? It really, I think, puts everything in perspective for everybody to understand that it's real, it's there, it's happening. Right. And like when you're talking about, you're basically having to choose what's worth your time and what's not worth your time. Right. Like, is this trip to the mall going to be worth me not getting to hang out and what I want to do for a couple of days? Right. Like, that's tough. I can't imagine having to decide every day what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do to make sure that I can still do stuff tomorrow.
Right.
Like, so very cool having you on. Thank you for coming on and chatting about it and kind of telling everybody, like I had mentioned a little earlier, I have a coworker that's dealt with it. So I have some familiarity with it. So when you brought it up, it wasn't just like, oh, I've never heard of this before. Right. Which I think is true for probably some people, that this is something that some people have never really heard of. Now we're exposed to a lot more nowadays than we ever, everybody was in the past, but very cool having you on. You're kind of like like a little warrior ninja over there, just like, kicking ass and taking names. But so thanks for coming on and chatting about it. I appreciate, telling your story, and hopefully everybody that's listening is going to too. And it sounds like you're chatting up a really awesome organization, which is, what this show is, all about, and what I'm hoping for it to be about. Well, we get to chat about football and complain about things too, but realistically, we want to chat about charities doing great things and meet people like you that are having to deal with it, so we can get a perspective of what's actually taking place. Cool. Thank you very much. Do you guys have anything else that you kind of want to throw out about it? Is there any like programs that you, besides the NFA, anything that you kind of want to be like, there's a support group here if you're local to Western New York, any of that kind of stuff?
There's a lot of support groups online, Reddit, Facebook. That's where you're going to find us, because we really can't leave our houses. But what I would say the most is, if you know someone who has it, don't judge them. Take the time to look into it. Take the time to educate yourself. Like, it's not a fake thing. We're not faking it. It's not in our heads. This is very, very real. We don't have a support system. We don't have people to help us typically. I personally lost every single friend I ever had. Friends for 16 years, 20 years, they just left me. Some of my family still doesn't believe me. So do some research, look into the spoon theory. That's one thing that we use a lot. We call ourselves spoonies, just help someone, empathy, just be understanding. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Listen. For starters, just listen and take that in instead of listening while prejudging what you're listening to. Right. Yeah.
Right. And the spoon theory is more or less what I talked about, energy consumption.
Right.
Like, say you've got, 100% of your energy, let's say 1 spoon is 10%. You've got 10 spoons for that day. And maybe for her, it takes her 6 to go to work. She's got 4 left when she comes home, right? Cooking dinner is 1. Then she runs out and she says, okay, well, if I want to do this activity, I got to borrow from tomorrow, and that's kind of how they make it, more
Right.
It's like you're spoon feeding yourself.
Right? And I will say one thing before we move on to the Bills talk, or whatever. My dad died from cancer in 1998, so it's not that I'm not familiar with cancer, and I saw him suffer through the radiation, and he had like the fanny pack with the constant radiation, the stint and all that stuff. And I would hear him in his room, like moaning from the pain, and his legs used to just from the ankles up used to turn like fire engine red. And I could just, the amount of pain that he was going through, like I could tell it was very, very bad. And I would say that the pain that she goes through is the same. The difference is that, like I said, there's no cure. Right. My dad was either going to live or he wasn't. She got this when she was 26. She's going to have it until she's 90. So I can't I asked my dad if I could, how would you feel living with the pain that you lived with that for 60 years?
Right. Yeah.
That's when you break it down like that, I think it just sort of, it gives people a good perspective on just what it's like,
Well, and it's actually taking probably to somebody that's supposed to be 90, 100 years and potentially moving them more towards a 70, 80, just because they're taking so much more stress on the body, right?
Not only that, but it opens the door to more diseases. Usually when you have fibro, you get chronic fatigue. And chronic fatigue is an autoimmune disease, which means when you have one autoimmune disease, you're open to more. So rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, MS. And then you get just a plethora of diseases on top of the fibromyalgia. So
IBS,
different,
all kinds of celiac disease.
Yeah.
So understandable. All right. Well, again, Mellissa, thank you very much for, speaking out and, telling us your story and kind of, giving us perspective on what's going on there. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again down the road at some point in time.
Bye.
Bye. We'll see you. All right, Charlie. So now we'll switch it over a little bit and let's dig a little deeper into the draft value score.
Okay.
So you kind of mentioned it a little bit. Kind of what got you to start this and why, or what you got you to this point where you're like, I need to do this draft value score.
Well, that's funny. I guess as I think about it, there's a few different people that I really have to thank. One of them really is Mike Shope, believe it or not. Another one is Ralph Wilson, sort of for his incompetence near the end, really, is how it kind of came into play. Oh, there we go with the sorry. They had when the Bills were drafting running backs, right? They had Marshawn Lynch and this long list of running backs that I just really got fed up with the team, and I really decided that nothing was going to get better, unfortunately, until the team was in other hands. And so I decided I still watch the games, but I couldn't really invest quite as much emotion as I was back in the 90s when I was in the stands and they were going to Super Bowls. I couldn't do it anymore. So I started getting more into the league, and I've always been a big draft guy. I love the draft. I'm the guy who simulates the season on Madden and just does the off season.
Right.
So I was listening to WGR, and this is maybe 2016. And Mike Shope has this thing where he says, well, why do we even need GMs? Why do we even need scouts? With all the literature that's out there, Lindy's, Street and Smith, Mel Kiper, the Draft Network. You're telling me that I can't just open one of those books and pick the players? How hard can it be?
Right.
And so that got me thinking, well, how hard can it be? And then I was watching ESPN maybe the year after, and they were talking about draft pick hit rate. And they said, well, 40% of draft picks are hits. And me being a sort of a rude skeptic said, "Oh yeah, how do you know that?" And so I searched the internet for some sort of metric or statistic that would tell me what they consider a hit, what they consider a miss. What's the criteria? I couldn't find anything. I've come to find out that it's more or less getting the player to like a second contract.
Right.
And I said, well, that's terrible.
Right.
I mean, you might draft a guy in the first round. You might give him a second contract, but that doesn't mean he lived up to what you thought when you drafted him in the first round. So I started doing this scoring system, and it was really bad, but I didn't know it was really bad at the time. And I tweeted at Joe Marino that Myles Garrett was a bust. And this was in 2018-ish.
Yeah.
And I figured the only way to get noticed was to tweet at somebody like that until they either blocked me or they got so annoyed that they wanted to talk to me. It only took Joe 2 tweets to want to talk to me. So I was really excited about that. We talked on the phone, and he said, I think your idea is great, but I think your scoring system is terrible. And he also told me, he said, I think you're doing 2 things. I think that you have a system that's going to tell you whether or not a pick is a hit or a miss, but you're also going to be able to tell us what kind of value a team is getting from a player. And I thought to myself, wow, he's right. I am. So I developed a better scoring system. I talked Melissa's ear off for literally 18 months about how am I going to measure a fullback's production. And does this sound right to you? And of course she had no idea.
Right.
She was very patient with me. And I came up with this system that I call the draft value score. I tested it on about 200 different players, and here we are now, and I'm ready to. I'm rolling out a little slowly, but it is available, and I think it's fantastic. So, and Joe's on board with it, and I talked to a few other people who have connections in the league, and they think it's a pretty good idea. So we made a analytics company with it centered around that, and we're going to see what happens.
Excellent. I like it. So let's chat then. So you 200 players, who's somebody that you could say right now off the top of your head that we've drafted that came out with a good score?
Bruce Smith.
Yeah, that long ago, right?
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing though, your score is based not only necessarily just on like them getting to a second contract, right? It's more about what is it have longevity involved, production,
contracts at all.
Right. So it's longevity, play, games played, stats in those games, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. Each position, I have 7 categories, and then basically what I do is I it's a yearly metric, so it's only calculated once the season's over, and it's a career metric, so the score isn't final until the player retires. So Tom Brady, his score is still going up or down, depending on his. Same with Drew Brees. I don't know if he's actually going to play. He says he's going to play now all of a sudden.
Right.
So there's 7 categories from each position group, and some of them are individual statistical categories, and other ones, especially like the offensive line, are more team-oriented, team success-oriented. I add up the numbers at the end of every year for every player, divided by 7, and it basically gives me a score similar to how somebody, Dane Brugler or somebody would grade a draft prospect 1 out of 10. The thing that's different for me is that any player who's a 9.97 or higher is a Hall of Famer. And did you just give you an example? Like Tom Brady's at a 20. Bruce Smith is at a 12. Jim Kelly's like a 10.47. So you can see, going to Super Bowls is beneficial.
Right, obviously.
But I think what the cool thing is it's the value component. And I think that's the thing that people have a tough time understanding is you take a guy maybe in the second round and fans, Cody Ford might be this type of player where fans say, oh, that guy, he sucks. And I'm going to sit here and say, and now maybe not right now, but he's in the league 3-4 more years. And even if he is a backup, he might hit the threshold where I consider him a hit, but I'm going to tell you that he certainly hasn't returned the value of a second round pick. So I have it graded like that. So like if Cody Ford has a score of 5.5, that's a hit, but he's really only returned the value of a 5th round pick. And I think that's what makes it unique. So it gives us more depth and more layers. and then you can compare. I can compare. I can tell you the hit rate any team has in any position in any round in any pick eventually. So I can tell you the hit rate the Buffalo Bills have had taking defensive tackles at pick 87, or I can tell you of in round 3 in total, whatever it is. Eventually I'll be able to tell you, whoever, all that information. So I think
how many years of data do you think you need to do that?
Well, right now I'm concentrating on going from 2000 to now.
Okay.
Just because that's where the active players are. I eventually want to go. I believe I can go back as far as 1980. And then the stats get really, they're not keeping track of sacks. They're not keeping track of, passes, like defense kind of run out of steam, like in the mid 90s, quarterback hits. So you kind of have to do some extrapolating once you get way back. But I wanted to make sure I got the 83 quarterback class, Kelly Marino away in there. I'm going back to 1980 because somebody asked me about Art Monk. So I figured I could go that far back. But the priority right now is to get all the current active players done, because then what I can do is I can write team reports, and I have these very detailed team player drafting and development reports. And then what I'll be able to say is, okay, well, where's Howie Roseman in relation to Bill Belichick? Where is Chris Ballard in relation to Howie Roseman and Chris Greer? And I'll be able to give people a ranking of the GMs and the organizations in general in terms of player development and player drafting. So when you hear somebody say, well, Howie Roseman is this great GM, and I can say, well, are you sure about that? Here's his hit rate, and it's the stuff like that. So I think it'll bring a lot of context to team building and that kind of stuff.
Very cool. As you just kind of I saw your excitement rising as you went more and more into depth with it, which got me excited even more, because I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Because that's the kind of stuff I would like to read, because I was watching, I forget who I was watching yesterday. I was watching a podcast yesterday, and they started talking about Detroit, right? Not trying to sidetrack us way off or anything, but they were talking about, Detroit and the situation that's taking place over there. And, now they've got Dan Campbell. And as Bills fans, we remember Dan Campbell, right? Because he interimed for the Dolphins there for a hot second, right? Where they actually made a run a little bit while he was the head coach. But there, to me, it's like, that is an organization that, if I'm just guessing, would have a terrible score from you, right? It's like they haven't
done their whole thing yet, but I would think that their score is pretty terrible,
right? I mean, you just imagine, and you've got to. I feel like it falls back to me. I've always thought this way, that it yes, you can be missing that quarterback, and you might not win until you truly get that quarterback, but that's all part of the organization as a whole not getting you there to get that quarterback in the first place. So, and I feel like we went through that for 20 plus years realistically, until we got Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane in the house before. Right. I mean, Doug Whaley did it a little bit, where he started to kind of square us away a little bit, but they reached a lot then too, to make that happen, which we don't have to do anymore. But it's just, where would you say the Bills, if you were just guessing right now, if you were to give them a number without really doing it, how would you rank McDermott and Beane right now?
Oh man, I think, well, the thing is that I gotta wait till the player's in the league for 3 years.
Okay.
As draft guy, I mean, if I do somebody's score after 1 year, it might be like an 8, and you're like, oh my God. But then, the more you pile on data, sometimes the score can actually come down a little bit. So this is the first year, I'll be doing Josh Allen's score, that draft class. I would say, if you're measuring from 2000 till now, the Bills score, it's probably really not that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, Whaley wasn't bad at getting talent. He just didn't have a plan. He just was like, oh, this guy's talented, but he never had a plan to put together. I think McDermott and Beane are certainly, Milano is a big, well, that's Doug Whaley technically, but it's right. McDermott too. Milano would be a big win, for that, because he's a 5th round pick. Even a guy like Ray McLeod, he doesn't play for the Bills, but he plays for Pittsburgh. He's their kick returner. I mean, that's a guy who I think is basically right at the line of already returning value. So I would say that Beane and McDermott have, if they keep doing what they're doing, will be top 5 in the league for sure. And just to give you some perspective, I did the Patriots because Bill Belichick's been there forever, for the 20 years. His hit rate's 44%. So
they actually don't draft very well.
Right. So whenever someone tells you that Bill Belichick drafts well, that is a lie. He doesn't draft well at all.
A lot of their success was when they started winning, they were able to get free agents to come in where they needed them at cheap contracts because they knew they had a chance to win a Super Bowl every year. Right? It wasn't they were drafting well. I mean, look at their draft class from last year. I mean,
his highest draft percentage was 2002, 66%. His lowest was 2007, 12%. So he had a hit rate of 12%.
So they got like nobody right.
Yeah. And so all this talk about he has all these picks. Who cares? He doesn't hit on them. It doesn't matter. And it's crazy to see too, because Tom Brady is such an outlier. I've got offensive linemen from the Patriots who literally played 5 years in the league. And like Anthony Munoz is like a 12 something. These guys are like 14s because they went to the Super Bowl every year with Tom Brady.
Right.
And they were scoring 60 touchdowns in an offense. And as an offensive lineman, I'm giving you credit for team success.
Do you have enough data on John Elway?
I have his score. I can pull it up for you in a second if I can get to the right thing. I've done Elway's score, I've done Marino's score, and I did Kelly's score because I was very curious as a Bills fan.
And do you have Elway as a GM?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you have Elway as a GM score as well?
No, I don't have Elway as a GM.
Not yet. Yeah.
No, but I'm interested in that too.
Yeah.
So let's see. Tom Brady's a 20.68. Marino is a 10.19. Kelly is a 10.17, and Elway is a 10.14. So they're all clustered right there together.
But so that actually proves your data to be pretty sound, then, though. Because
yeah, I mean,
those guys all were pretty competitive.
You can tell me if I'm crazy. Aikman's a 9.69, which would be just below Hall of Fame. Who else do I have? I got Edgerrin James at an 11.22. Eric Dickerson is a 10.22. Fred Taylor is 9.8. Eli Manning's like a 9.95. So he's like the typical, right? Like fringe Hall of Famer. Like
Super Bowl saved him, right? Yeah,
I actually based my I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but I based my entire who's a Hall of Famer, who's not a Hall of Famer on Eli Manning. Because I don't think he is, but I know a lot of people do. So I want whatever his score was, I was going to put the Hall of Fame 1 percentage point above his score.
Excellent. I really love that, actually.
Thanks, everybody.
But with him, I can see why you would choose somebody like him, but I think the reason that he gets in is because he won those Super Bowls. If you're going to put somebody like Kelly in, right, who never actually won a Super Bowl, or, he got 4 AFC championship titles, but never won the Super Bowl. If you're going to have somebody like that in, it's hard to turn down somebody that's got, Super Bowl victory. And he didn't have great numbers, but he didn't have like terrible numbers really either.
8-8, and then 12-4, and then 8-8 with a Super Bowl. It was really, really weird.
That division's been weird for 15 years. Realistically, they can't seem to figure themselves out. But cool. So we really won't be able to get the true like understanding and value of what you're up to for like a couple more years when you can really gather some more data, right? Except for being able to go back and get history.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing, right? Is every year there's 6 new GMs. So it's very hard to just sit there and say, I'm going to be able to compare all 32 current GMs to each other. That's very difficult because some guys get fired after 3 years.
Right.
And then you go into obviously like Phillip Rivers was drafted by the Giants, but obviously we all know that credit would go to the Chargers for his score. So so I don't, we wouldn't be able to, it's more like an organizational thing. Like obviously Bean will be here for a while. The guy in Baltimore is going to be there for a long time. Indy. So Howie Roseman's been there a while. But yeah, you can't really just like, I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where all 32 guys will have enough of a sample size to compare them all.
Right. Gotcha. So you have a, just as you were talking, it just popped in my head. Do you have a Deion Dawkins score?
Oh, I don't know if I've done Deion. I might have.
Because he's got to be just past the threshold, right? I mean, he's past his.
Probably from last year because I haven't done him yet this year. Let me check. Oh boy, he'll be a lot lower than this. Deion. I don't. Sean Trell.
This last season.
2.28. If that makes everyone feel good. No, I don't have Deion's score yet.
Okay. I was just curious because I feel like I feel like he would fall into a decent number, for where he was drafted, what he's done. He has made it to that second contract, whether that's involved or not. He's been successful and he's playing really well, I think. So I would imagine he'd have a good score. That's kind of
my threshold for like hit rate is basically like a 4, which is really like a 6th round value. So most guys, if they're a starter like him, they'll reach that in like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then it's, like I said, it's a career metric. If you play 7 years and you're really good, I mean, you play 10 years and you're really good, your score is going to be higher than if you played 7, obviously. But some guys, their score goes down, like JJ Watt. I mean, we're going to talk about him. I
was actually glad you segued right there. No, I was going to ask you if you had his score.
He missed 2 full years, right?
Right.
So his score, obviously, I'm still factoring that in.
Yeah.
Even though he played 3 games. So, obviously he doesn't get the stats really because he only played 3 games, but his score is still being divided. So, yeah, his score is going to take a hit because he was injured. So any guy that's been injured a lot, their score is going to go down, but that's part of it.
Has to be incorporated for draft value, right? I mean, you have to, how many games is the guy actually playing? That has to be included, right? You can't go around that.
Internal draft sheet, if you can ever get one from an NFL team, it's all like 6.5 to 7, second round player, eventual starter within everything has starter in it. So that's obviously what they look for, is they want starters.
Right. You're not drafting somebody to sit on the bench, right? I mean, like you ultimately want them to be your new stud, or
you know what I mean?
Right.
So
speaking, since you segued over to Watt, what was before going into what we found out, here recently, were you pro Watt to Buffalo or just kind of like whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't distraught that they didn't get him. I wasn't like ride or die necessarily for JJ Watt, but I wanted him. I thought he would have been a good fit. I don't think a player like that comes around a lot of the time. So I think there's a big issue with the Bills' defensive line, and I don't know really how they're going to solve it without him. I'm not really sure. So yeah, I mean, I really thought he'd be an amazing upgrade. I think he would have made Hughes better, Oliver. There would have been a lot of value in the Bills getting him.
Yeah, I was kind of going to only be okay with it if it was going to be around like a 10 million number. Like if we could have got him and brought him in for what we were dumping in Trent Murphy and what we're dumping in Tyler Kroft, even if we had to take those 2 salaries and package it up to put them at like 13, 12, I would have been maybe okay with it. I get why we want him, right? Because I agree with you that the defensive line struggled. Just from being in the past, I feel like we're going to see this defensive line pretty much the same coming into next season, because I think they believe in letting the system play out, right? And they'll think that if you just let these guys play one more season together in the same scheme, doing the same things, that it'll mesh, it'll work. What we were planning will actually work. I don't think it necessarily will, because Starr's coming back, so we'll see. I mean, I think I've been saying for a while, I think Oliver's going to have a great year next year because of Starr's return. I thought Oliver really played well for being out of position, and he developed throughout the year. But yeah, I mean, to me, I still think for as much money as you're paying there, you got to be good at something, or you should be way up in a category. Like you should be really good at the run, or you should be really good at pressure. You should be really good at sacks. Like one of those. Give me one of those for that kind of money, and we got none of them.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like I said, it's a big problem. If you're going to tell me that you're going to start Jerry Hughes, I'm fine with Jerry Hughes. I understand the analytics with him. I'm fine with him. I'm fine with Ed. I'm fine with Starr. And you're going to tell me it's Addison and Epinesa. I mean, Epinesa maybe, because I don't like to give up on guys. I'm not giving up on any player after 2 or 3 years. Give them some time. But if you're going to run that back and think that that's good enough, I mean, you said you weren't going to run it back. You said you're going to tear it. That's what they said. They're going to tear it down, look at everything, and
tearing it down can mean moving like one piece to them, right? Like that. I think that's what they feel like is tearing down. And like Starr too. We don't even know what we're going to get. We're presuming that we're going to get Starr what he was before he left, but we don't know yes, we should think that he's healthy and should hopefully be in phenomenal shape and didn't have a beating on his body for a year. So he should come back good and ready to go, but we don't really know if that's going to be the case. I mean, he took a year off of football. We don't know that he's going to come back and be the same guy that we were expecting. But yeah, I mean, in Epineza, I kind of have this feeling that they're going to shift him. Like they're going to try to stand him up.
Well, he's kind of like a JJ Watt guy. And I'm not trying to be hyperbole, but I mean, Watt's a guy who has a lot of success inside. It wasn't just outside. I mean, JJ Watt's kind of like a Reggie White. Like Reggie White played a lot of defensive tackle. He wasn't just a defensive end. And JJ Watt did the same thing. And Epineza has that same type of body structure. I'm not saying he's JJ Watt. Like, let's be honest. But
I feel like they might lean him towards that Lorenzo Alexander role.
Yeah. I mean, wherever you can use him where he's going to get the
He seems athletic enough to be in a little bit of pass coverage. I mean, I wouldn't want him like running around out there all the time, but he feels like he could fit that role a little bit.
Mario doesn't want him running out there all the time either.
Right. But
we don't drop the coverage there.
So then too, though, I mean, so we kind of both were like cool with Watt if we got him, because it would have been an upgrade. But I feel like it would have been a small window, and I'm not sure that we're necessarily the team yet that should be trying to trickle into that. We got to make it happen in 2 years yet. I want us to try to build a little more long-term than that. But I was a little relieved that he chose to go other places. When I saw some of the numbers coming out, I was like, oh, that's going to mean a big change to the team if we try to bring him in, right? We're going to have to see a lot of different moving parts.
I mean, the money was a little weird, right? I wasn't that concerned about the money because I've listened to enough Greg Thompson to know that, I mean, you can do weird things with the salary.
Oh, yeah.
So like I knew that it wasn't going to be like we're going to pay him $16 million. It might say that, but you might really give him like $3 million, and then next year it's like 35. Whatever.
Right? Yeah.
How they can spread that out and do goofy things with roster bonuses, like
they do a lot more up front now. Yeah, they just move a lot of it up front, and then you don't have to take the cap hit. Make it a signing bonus. It doesn't count against your cap. You do things. Yeah, I mean, I imagine we'll see a lot of that as soon as this league season opens up. I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing a lot of teams just restructuring as many guys as they can. I mean, you've seen the Saints doing a lot of it already, and they've saved a lot of money by doing it already. So I know we have money to work with. I know, yes, if you go look at lists, we've got a small number to work with, but that's just right now, right? I mean, I think we'll see some things happen, especially if we miss out on Milano, which I think is probably going to happen, that we'll really look to move money around to make a move, right? Because at that point, we're going to have to. I
think the Milano thing has to happen. Now that you look at the money, and I know I just said that, you can make it look like we're only paying him $1 million next year, but still, at some point, you're going to be paying him all that money because obviously you want to keep him. I think it's almost a thing where he has to go at this point just because of the salary cap.
Right.
We can restructure Brown and Morris a little bit and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But still, I mean, if you want Darrell Williams, it's probably at least $12 million, I would think.
Would you rather him than Milano right now?
Yeah,
I would too.
I think so. I think you can. I mean, it's a hit either way, but you got to protect Josh.
Yeah, I mean, you get 4 more years out of Williams, I think, if he, till he's 32, 33, and I agree. I think, Josh, the defense proved this year that they're not going to necessarily win us games, right? In the current nature that they're in, but who is going to? Josh Allen is going to. So you got to keep him upright. And that line proved to be pretty good at times last year. I mean, they were terrible at the beginning of the season and they really took a while to develop, and we'll see, because we don't know what's going on with Feliciano yet either, truly. Right. And is Ike Bacher going to be the guy at left guard again next year? I mean, I anticipate we probably want to do better than that, but he's also young and cheap, and he played pretty well. So who knows?
Yeah, being said, Ford will be in the mix, which is fine. I mean, he got hurt. He's only in his third year, coming into his third year. I think you got to let these guys develop. That's my sort of Dawson Knox argument is, I'm okay with like a Kyle Rudolph or something, but at the same time, I don't want to give up on Knox. You got to give these. If we're going to give, my whole thing is if you're going to give Josh Allen 4 years or 3 years, well, then let's give everybody 3 years.
Yeah, piece them all together if you can.
You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying is.
Yeah, I think if you can keep them together, then that's what you do, right? And I thought Bean kind of made some moves at the end of the offseason too to set himself up for coming into the offseason when he went after like Kenny Stills and he brought him in. And he got Kumaro back. I mean, those are guys that you could sign on, and that's good quality wide receiver crew. right?
Yeah,
So
we got Hodgins too, who you
don't know about yet. Davis is going to be back. You still got Beasley running around. We don't know what's going to happen with John Brown. I really hope we keep him. I mean, in some form or fashion, it's probably going to take less money, right? He's going to have to be willing to take less money, but
like ask him to take a little, give him an extra year, but maybe reduce his salary this year is probably what they'll do.
Right. Yeah. Or just front load him, give him something, everything up front.
You're right.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on the defense pretty good. Is there any real position on the offense that you're like, we definitely need to do something different?
Well, I think they really need to figure out the interior. I think it was Bean mentioned Bakker, and he said, yeah, Ike started playing really good once we kind of left him in one spot. And I'm kind of like, as I'm listening to his press conference, I'm like screaming at my computer. Well, then do the same thing with Cody Ford.
Yeah, do that with everybody then.
Yeah, like leave him in one spot. Stop moving these guys around. But I mean, if they run it back next year, like the same way they did this year, I'd love more speed somewhere, whether or not that's like Kadarius Toney in the draft or a late round running back who can really run. I do think that the Bills are approaching the time where they're starting to get into an arms war with the Chiefs in terms of speed. And I don't know that I necessarily want them to take like a wide receiver in the first round, but I'm telling you, Kadarius Toney is like the next sort of Tyreek Hill light. And if we don't take him and then they take him at 31, I mean, at some point you've got to put some serious speed on this offense because you see how scared we are of their speed. You've got to make them scared of our speed. At some point you've got to do that.
Right. I think some of that stems from the backfield too, right? Our inability to make the backfield anything kind of relevant last year made it very easy to defend us in a lot of aspects. And we still played really well and put up a lot of numbers. So I think if you can get something like you're talking about, I agree. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about the tight ends. I'm a little, I would be okay with bringing in the veteran tight end right now and letting Dawson kind of win it if he can win it, right? Absolutely. If he can beat him out and he beats him out, go for it. I was chiming all off season in hopes that the Browns would go ahead and just let Njoku go or trade him or do something. And I was like, that's the guy. Like if we can get somebody like that's tall and lengthy and's got speed, the middle of the field, if we figure out the way to expose the middle of the field without having to be our wide receivers or Cole Beasley, we get very dangerous, I think. But if real quick, as we're getting close to an hour here and I want to give you some time to chat up everything you're doing. If you were to say right now, if you could bring in one running back and then we still got Singletary and Moss, who is your number one running back? The guy you bring in or one of those two?
Man, I think Zach Moss would be my starter. But if I'm bringing in a guy like a late round guy, and even a guy like a Chuba Hubbard, who's kind of a track guy late in the draft, I'd like to use him as sort of like a change of pace, like a Reggie Bush sort of type guy. But I think Zach Moss would be my starter. I think Zach is pretty good pass catching. I think he's great at blitz pickups and things like that. And yeah, he's not the fastest guy, and I don't think he necessarily lived up to his I'm going to make, defenders make business decisions, but I like him more than I like Singletary. And I think if there is going to be an addition to the backfield, it would be a home run hitter, sort of change of pace guy. I wouldn't want to draft, like ETN or something in the first round, or I don't want to like trade for Ezekiel Elliott or something like that. I'm fine with Zach Moss and then somebody who's just faster than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was clamoring a little bit that I feel like maybe a guy like a Mark Ingram could be a nice add to the room, so he can just kind of develop them. But I feel like we are missing the speed aspect in the backfield, and I know Ingram doesn't fill that role, but you can almost see in the run game. Like I think if you go back and watch, a lot of times you can see there's the hole, and we're just nowhere near getting there, right? But I do agree with you that I thought at the beginning of last season that Zach Moss would be the number one back by the end of the season because just playing in Utah he felt a little more built to play in what we were going to try to do, or what I thought we were going to try to do at the beginning of the season. That he fits that role. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's good at blocking. He's thicker. He's built more for December, January is what kind of where I was trending with him. So I agree. I think he's going to be the one, and I'm curious to see what we're going to do, because we still, like, how much longer do we roll with Yeldon and Jones? And this is like our thing, right? It feels like we got Antonio Williams there that I think should get more flavor next year, more of a try, and get Jones maybe out of there and start getting some more, as I know we're real young at the starters, but it feels like behind that we're very old and they're not very good. Right. So I would rather just have more youth that's speedy and ready to go than having those guys.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're seeing, and this is something that I thought Bean did really well, is you're starting to see that he basically had surrounded Josh with a lot of veterans, to sort of isolate the variable of Josh and whether or not he's going to be good. And now we're starting to see some of those contracts fall off. Mm-hmm. That's sort of giving us, not obviously this year was unpredictable, but it's giving you the room to now re-sign these younger guys. So you're going to, you're losing a Yeldon, you're losing, a contract like a Milano. I thought they were going to re-sign him, and you're giving yourself the room to create a younger core of your draft picks. And those are going to replace guys like John Brown and guys like Feliciano eventually. So I think Bean did a good job of building the team and stacking them like that. But you're right. Now you've got to replace a Yeldon with, I don't know, 4th round rookie running back, whoever that guy is,
because it's got to be cheap, right? It's got to be something cheap still.
Now is you've got to get cheap filler players around your core 10 guys.
Right.
These guys are all going to get new contracts.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, we're coming up on an hour. I want to give you some time to chat. I really appreciate you coming on, Charlie. When I reached out, I was really grateful that you were like, heck yeah, let's do it. I see you kind of a little more now why you were so on board after meeting Mellissa, your wife, earlier, and everything, that you got a good story to chat about and everything. But before we get out of here, why don't you just, we've been talking about the draft value score and that kind of stuff, but I know you got other stuff going on. So why don't you let everybody know what else you're up to, where all they can find you, anything big you got going on you want them to know about.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I thought this was a really cool idea. I got a show on the Bills Brawl. I have 2 shows. One's called The Process. That's with EJ Daniels. I got a Friday show called The Podcaster's Corner, where we talk about podcasting. And actually, you asking me to come on is kind of what inspired me to do that. Because I said, oh, man, this guy's created his own lane. Like, that's so great. It's so hard to do that in this market now. But if you want to get a hold of me on Twitter, it's Charlie_Gross_. Like I said, I am one of the hosts of the Bills Brawl on the Brawl Network. Twitter handle is @BillsBrawl. I also have my own analytics company called Trust the Process Analytics. That Twitter is @TTP_analytics. We're working on a website, but until then, I will have most, if not all, of my data and articles on a Patreon that I'll be getting together this summer, and then we'll have it ready to go for the start of the season. I'm also a student at the Scouting Academy, so I'll be writing some scouting reports. I'll be doing some mock drafts, things like that. We're also going to have some in-season stuff, since I said that the draft value score is obviously a draft analytic, and week 4 of the NFL season, people don't care about the draft. We've got a completion percentage metric coming out. And we're also playing around with, yes, the thing that Bills Mafia loves the most. Say it with me, Mafia. Player grades. We will probably have player grades. So you can yell at me all you want about how I hate Josh Allen because I only gave him a 74 or whatever it is. So look forward to that. That stuff will be on socials. I'll be getting an Instagram account going, probably, and a Facebook page. But for now, you can find me on Twitter @Charlie_Gross_. And once again, I appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk the Bills and my analytics, but also obviously the Fibromyalgia Association and how that can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you came on, Charlie. It was a great chat. For those of you who've been watching, you obviously see Charlie's info scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So if you can go check it out on YouTube and watch this. You'll also see that the NFA, their website for donating is scrolling there for you guys. But you can also, you'll find it in the show notes and all that kind of stuff. And of course, I appreciate you guys listening in again. The show is about just kind of hopefully bringing some knowledge out there, learning about new things, and we're going to chat it up with a bunch of cool people doing cool things. And I want to say again, thank you to Melissa, for joining us, Charlie's wife, who, got to tell her story, which was really awesome. And go follow Charlie. You guys, he just told you where he's at. He's a sharp dude. You can obviously tell by listening to him. He's got a lot of cool things going on. So thanks again, Charlie, for having me on, man. I really are having you come on with me, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And of course, everybody, you can see at the bottom there, if you want to find all of my stuff, I'm at thebuffalonerd.com. I do got Patreon as well. You can check that out. Patreon, just look up the Buffalo Nerd and type in Patreon. You'll find it. Got some shirts going on. If you guys want to support the show that way, all the proceeds and everything are going to go to the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. That's my spotlight charity for the year. So anything that the show brings in, it's going to be sent over to those guys and everything like that. So you guys can find all that stuff over at thebuffalonerd.com. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Buffalo Nerd with Colt Schroeder. Before you go, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Colt on all social channels at The Buffalo Nerd and at The Buffalo